the scrape of a knife against the bottom of a butter dish, metal on ceramic. You're trying to get every last smear, every molecule, because that's it. That's your butter for the week. 4 ounces, the size of a deck of cards. It's Monday morning, January 1943. You're standing in your kitchen in Manchester. The linoleum floor is cold under your feet. Your breath makes small clouds in the air because coal is rationed too, and you're saving it for evening. On the table in front of you sits this week's food, all of it, everything the government says you need to survive. 1 egg, if you're lucky. Sometimes there are no eggs at all, just a small tin of powdered egg that tastes like chalk and optimism. 2 ounces of tea, 8 ounces of sugar, 4 ounces of bacon, 4 ounces of margarine to go with that butter you're scraping, 1 ounce of cheese, about the size of 3 dice, and meat. You get a shilling's worth, which sounds generous until you realize that's maybe half a pound if your butcher likes you. If he doesn't, you're getting liver. Again, this isn't a diet. This is survival. This is what 70 million people in Britain ate every single day for 5 years. And here's what nobody tells you about it. Here's what the history books leave out. It's not just that there isn't enough food. It's that every single meal becomes a calculation, a negotiation with scarcity. You start thinking about food the moment you wake up, and you fall asleep thinking about it too. I decided to live this way for a week. 7 days on the exact rations that a British civilian received in 1943. The exact amounts, the exact restrictions, no cheating, no supplements, no sneaking a chocolate bar when nobody's looking. Just me, a 1943 ration book, and the growing realization that I had absolutely no idea what hunger actually felt like. This is that story. But to understand what happened to me, to really grasp what this experience revealed, we need to go back to the moment when Britain realized that food itself had become a weapon. Let's go back to September 1939. Britain declares war on Germany, and within hours something shifts in every kitchen across the country. Not panic, not yet. Just this quiet understanding that everything is about to change. Because Britain doesn't grow enough food to feed itself. It never has. Before the war, the country imports 60% of its food. 60%! That's bacon from Denmark, butter from New Zealand, wheat from Canada, sugar from the Caribbean. It all comes by ship. Thousands of ships crossing the Atlantic every month. And now those ships are targets. The German U-boats are already out there, lurking beneath the gray water. In the first 3 weeks of war, they sink 41 merchant vessels. By October, that number doubles. The Atlantic Ocean, which used to be a highway for British commerce, becomes a graveyard. Every ship that goes down takes tons of food with it. Crates of butter sinking into darkness, sacks of flour bursting open in the cold water. And on shore, in quiet government offices, civil servants begin doing terrible mathematics. How long can we survive? The answer comes back in weeks, not months. Rationing isn't some dramatic decision announced with trumpets and speeches. It's inevitable. It's already written in the water, in those sinking ships, in the simple fact that Britain is an island under siege. The Ministry of Food, which barely existed before the war, suddenly becomes one of the most powerful departments in government. They have one job: make sure Britain doesn't starve. January 8th, 1940. Rationing begins. Bacon first, ham, butter, sugar. The ministry prints 45 million ration books, one for every person in the country. Children get green books. Adults get buff-colored ones. The books are small, about the size of a passport, filled with tiny paper coupons, each one stamped with letters and numbers. These little squares of paper become more valuable than money. You can't eat money, but a coupon can buy butter, if there's butter. And this is where it gets fascinating. Because rationing isn't just about limiting food, it's about reimagining an entire society's relationship with eating. Enter Frederick Marquis. You probably know him as Lord Woolton. In April 1940, Prime Minister Chamberlain appoints him Minister of Food, and Woolton approaches the job like he's managing a siege, which in a way he is. He's not a politician, he's a businessman, practical, obsessed with efficiency, and he understands something crucial. You can't just tell people to eat less. You have to convince them it's noble. You have to make hunger feel like patriotism. So Woolton launches the Kitchen Front campaign. Suddenly there are posters everywhere. Dig for victory. Images of housewives brandishing spades like weapons, transforming flower gardens into vegetable plots. Food is a munition of war. Make do and mend. The language is militaristic, deliberate. You're not just cooking dinner, you're fighting. Every meal is a small battle won against Hitler. Woolton gives radio broadcasts. He's got this avuncular voice, warm but firm, and he speaks directly to housewives. Not at them, to them. He calls them comrades. He thanks them for their sacrifices. People start calling him Uncle Fred. It works. It has to work, because by 1941, the rations are getting tighter. Tea drops to 2 ounces, cheese to 1 ounce. Eggs become rare as gold. The ministry starts distributing powdered egg, which arrives in tins from America and tastes like someone's distant memory of what eggs should be. Fresh eggs? You get 1 per week. If you're lucky, if the chickens are laying, if the supply chain holds, if. And meat. God, the meat situation. You don't buy meat by weight anymore. You buy it with points. Each person gets a shilling's worth per week, and butchers post their prices daily. Beef might be 2 shillings per pound. Mutton, slightly less. Liver, which nobody really wants, sells for 8 pence. So you learn to love liver. You learn to love everything because refusing food isn't an option anymore. This is the world I'm about to enter. January 1943, frozen in time, waiting for me 78 years later with a ration book and a grocery list that would fit on a napkin. Day 1 begins with confidence. I wake up Monday morning thinking, this'll be interesting, educational, maybe even fun in a historical reenactment sort of way. I've got my week's rations laid out on the kitchen counter, carefully measured. 4 ounces of butter in a small dish, 4 ounces of bacon, which is about 4 slices, 1 egg, 2 ounces of loose tea, which looks like a lot until you remember it has to last 7 days. The margarine, the cheese, the sugar, everything weighed on a digital scale, translated from 1943 measurements to modern grams. I make myself breakfast. 1 slice of bread, toasted, a scraping of margarine, a cup of tea with a tiny bit of sugar. That's it. No eggs on day 1. I'm saving that. No bacon yet. I'm trying to be strategic. By 10 o'clock, I'm hungry. Not uncomfortable, just aware. My stomach is sending these polite inquiries. Hello? Anything else coming? No? Okay then. I ignore it. I've got work to do. I sit at my desk, and for the first hour it's fine. But then something strange happens. I can't concentrate. I keep thinking about lunch. I'm not supposed to eat lunch for 2 more hours, but I'm already planning it. What will I have? How much can I allocate? Should I use some of the cheese now or save it? These aren't normal thoughts for me. Usually I eat without thinking. Food appears, I consume it, I move on. But now every bite requires strategy. Lunch is bread, cheese, and an apple. The apple isn't rationed, thank God. The government encouraged people to eat local fruit and vegetables, anything that didn't require shipping. I eat slowly, trying to make it last. The cheese disappears in 3 bites. I'm still hungry. Afternoon arrives. I'm cold. I'm working from home, and normally I keep the heating moderate, but today it feels colder than usual. Later I'll learn why. Your body generates heat by metabolizing food. Fewer calories means less body heat. The people in 1943 knew this intimately. They wore layers. They moved carefully, conserving energy. They learned to live a smaller, slower life. By evening, I'm genuinely hungry. The kind of hunger that's not quite pain, but isn't comfortable either. A hollow feeling. I make dinner. This is where I decide to use the bacon. I fry 2 slices until they're crispy, cook some potatoes, and make a thin gravy from the bacon fat, flour, and water. It's not bad. It's actually decent. But the portion is small. 2 pieces of bacon, 2 medium potatoes, some cabbage I bought with my own money because vegetables weren't heavily rationed. I eat everything on my plate. I'm still hungry. Here's what I'm discovering. It's not starvation. It's something more insidious. It's perpetual insufficiency. You're eating, but you're never quite full. Your body is always waiting for more. And the psychological effect of this is fascinating. I check the clock constantly, not to know the time, but to calculate how long until I can eat again. 4 hours, 3 hours, 2 hours. Day 2 is harder. I wake up hungry. I make the same breakfast, toast, margarine, tea. It doesn't satisfy. Mid-morning, I catch myself staring at the food supply on my counter. Should I dip into tomorrow's rations? Just a bit of cheese? Nobody would know. But that's exactly what people in 1943 faced, that daily temptation to borrow from the future. Most resisted. They had to. Borrowing from Tuesday meant Tuesday would be worse. I eat lunch, bread, the smallest slice of bacon, some leftover potatoes. I'm learning to spread things out, to never have a completely empty moment, but also never a completely full one. And then, mid-afternoon on day 2, something interesting happens. I stop feeling hungry. Not because I'm satisfied, but because my body seems to adjust. The hunger becomes background noise, like tinnitus. It's always there, but I stop actively noticing it unless I pay attention. This is survival mode. This is what millions of British people experienced every day for 5 years. Now, here's where I need to tell you about the women who actually lived this life, because my experiment is play acting. For them, it was reality. Meet Nella Last. She's a housewife in Barrow-in-Furness, and she keeps a diary throughout the entire war for the Mass Observation Project. Her entries are detailed, unflinching, sometimes heartbreaking. She writes about queuing for 2 hours for a tiny piece of beef, about the creative ways she stretches rations, about the guilt she feels when she manages to get a little extra from a friendly shopkeeper while others go without. In one entry from 1942, she writes about making a cake for her son's birthday. A cake! Think about that. What do you need for a cake? Eggs, butter, sugar, all rationed. She saves for weeks, she hoards, she trades. And finally, she makes this tiny cake, and she writes about watching her son eat it, and you can feel her joy mixed with this overwhelming sadness that such a small thing requires so much effort. Then there's Elizabeth Colling, a factory worker in London. She keeps her diary too. She writes about the exhaustion, not just from the work, though the work is brutal, but from the constant mental mathematics of rationing. I spend more time thinking about food than I do working, she writes in September 1941. I dream about bread and butter. Dreams about bread and butter. Let that sit with you for a moment. These women weren't starving in the dramatic sense. The British rationing system was actually quite successful at preventing malnutrition. Calorie intake dropped, yes, but it dropped from pre-war excess to something closer to actual nutritional need. Vitamin deficiency was rare because the government subsidized milk for children and pregnant women, distributed cod liver oil and orange juice. Lord Woolton and his team of nutritionists designed the rations carefully, prioritizing protein and vitamins even when quantity was limited. But there's a difference between not starving and having enough. And the psychological toll of never having enough is its own kind of hunger. By day 3 of my experiment, I understand this viscerally. Wednesday morning, day 3, and something has shifted. I wake up and I don't want to get out of bed. Not because I'm tired, though I am, but because getting up means facing another day of not enough. I lie there for an extra 10 minutes, and I realize I'm depressing myself on purpose. I'm creating a little delay before I have to confront the food situation. This is new for me. I've never had this relationship with eating. Food has always been abundant, available, assumed. Open the fridge, something's there. Walk to a store, buy something. Order takeout. It's all so easy. But now, just 3 days in, that ease is gone. Food has become effort. Food has become thought. Food has become the main character of my day. I make breakfast, same as before. Toast, margarine, tea. I'm out of sugar. I used the last of it yesterday, and now my tea tastes thin and bitter. This seems like a small thing, but it's not. Sugar was one of the few pleasures available. 2 teaspoons in your tea, and for 60 seconds, you could pretend things were normal. Without it, even tea becomes a reminder of scarcity. The morning drags. I'm trying to work, but my concentration is shot. I keep making mistakes, having to redo things. My brain feels foggy. Later I'll research this and discover that what I'm experiencing is mild hypoglycemia. My blood sugar is low, not dangerously so, but enough that my cognitive function is impaired. People in 1943 lived with this constantly. The brain fog, the difficulty focusing, the way everything takes just a bit more effort than it should. And the cold. God, the cold. It's not even particularly cold outside, maybe 50 degrees, but I'm wearing 2 sweaters indoors and I'm still chilled. My hands are cold, my feet are cold. I'm burning fewer calories, so I'm generating less heat. This is what Nella Last writes about in her diaries. The cold, how it creeps into everything, how you can't quite get warm no matter how many layers you wear. Lunch is the egg, finally. I've been saving it, rationing my rations, but I can't wait anymore. I soft boil it, place it in an egg cup the way they would have in 1943, and I eat it with a single piece of toast. The egg is gone in 6 bites. I'm still hungry. Afternoon. I take a walk, hoping movement will distract me. It doesn't. Instead, I become acutely aware of food everywhere. A cafe window displays pastries. A restaurant menu promises burgers and fries. People are eating on a bench, unwrapping sandwiches. I'm not judging them. I'm envying them. This casual abundance. They don't even seem grateful. They're just eating, scrolling their phones, existing in a world where food is background noise. I get home and check my remaining rations. It's Wednesday and I've got 4 days left and I'm already running low on everything. The bacon's almost gone. The cheese is gone. I've got butter, margarine, some tea, and not much else. I have vegetables, potatoes, bread, but those don't feel like enough anymore. Your body craves fat and protein. It needs them, and I'm not getting enough. This is when it hits me, the real insight. The thing I couldn't understand before I started this experiment. Rationing wasn't just about quantity. It was about predictability. See, right now, I know I'm going back to normal food in 4 days. I'm uncomfortable, yes, but I'm not scared. I can endure this because I know it's temporary. But imagine not knowing when it ends. Imagine being told, this is your life now, indefinitely, until the war's over. And nobody knows when that will be. 1944? 1945? 1950? What if Germany wins and the rationing gets worse? What if a U-boat sinks the convoy and next week there's no butter at all? That uncertainty, that's the real horror. And yet, people adapted. Humans are astonishingly adaptable. They found ways to make it work. They got creative. Let me tell you about Woolton Pie. This becomes one of the most famous wartime recipes, named after Lord Woolton himself. It's a vegetable pie, just vegetables. Potatoes, carrots, turnips, whatever you can grow or find. You cook them with a bit of oatmeal and vegetable stock, put them in a pie crust made with lard and flour, and bake it. No meat, no cheese, just vegetables pretending to be something more substantial. The Ministry of Food publishes the recipe in newspapers nationwide. They promote it in radio broadcasts. They get restaurants to serve it. And people make it. Thousands of people make it. Because when you're hungry, even a vegetable pie starts looking good. But here's what's fascinating. Woolton Pie becomes more than just a recipe. It becomes a symbol. It represents this collective determination to make do with less, to transform scarcity into something approaching dignity. There's even a sort of competition among housewives to see who can make the best version, who can add a clever twist. One woman adds a pinch of powdered egg for richness. Another uses leftover bacon fat for flavor. They share tips in queues, in air raid shelters, in letters to magazines. This is the kitchen front that Lord Woolton talked about. Not just rationing, but a kind of culinary resistance. We're hungry, but we're not beaten. We'll make something from nothing, and we'll do it with grace. By day 4, I'm making my own version of Woolton Pie. I've got potatoes, carrots, an onion, some turnip. I follow a 1943 recipe I found online. I make a pastry with margarine and flour. I bake it. It smells good. That's something. It actually smells good. I eat a quarter of the pie for dinner. It's filling. Genuinely filling. Not satisfying in the way a steak would be, but it sits in my stomach and the hunger recedes. I feel almost triumphant. Look at me. I'm surviving. But then I do the math. I've eaten a quarter of the pie. I have 3/4 left, and 3 days to go. If I eat another quarter tomorrow, I'll run out too soon. I need to make it last. So I wrap it, put it in the fridge, and try not to think about it. That night, I sleep badly. I wake up at 3 in the morning, genuinely hungry. My stomach is making noises. I lie there in the dark, thinking about the pie in the kitchen. 20 feet away. I could get up, cut a slice, just a small one, but I don't. I lie there, waiting for morning, and I think about all those people in 1943 doing exactly this, lying in the dark, hungry, waiting. Day 5 is when the anger starts. I don't expect this. I expected hunger, sure, fatigue, yes, but anger catches me off guard. I'm angry at everything. At the rationing system, even though I'm doing this voluntarily. At the war, even though it ended 80 years ago. At the abundance around me that I can't access. At myself for choosing to do this stupid experiment. I make breakfast, same as always. I'm so sick of margarine on toast. I'm so sick of thin tea. I want coffee. I want eggs, plural. I want bacon, a whole plate of it, crispy and salty and unlimited. Instead, I have my small portion, and I go for a walk to clear my head. I pass a bakery. The smell of fresh bread and pastries hits me like a physical force. I actually stop walking. I stand outside the window, looking at the display. Croissants, danishes, cinnamon rolls the size of my hand, and I feel this rage, this completely irrational anger at these baked goods for existing, for being abundant, for not being available to me right now. This is when I understand something about wartime Britain that I'd never grasped before. The black market. See, rationing was strict, but it wasn't perfect. There were always ways around it if you had money and connections. Restaurants could serve unrationed meals. Wealthy people could eat well, while factory workers scraped by. And this created resentment. Deep, bitter resentment. The government tried to address it. They capped restaurant prices at 5 shillings per meal. They sent inspectors to ensure compliance. They prosecuted black marketeers. But the inequality remained, hidden but felt. If you knew the right butcher, you might get extra meat. If you had friends in the countryside, they might slip you a few eggs. It wasn't fair, but fairness was a luxury nobody could afford. I'm thinking about this as I walk home, and I realize my anger isn't really about food. It's about control. For 5 days, I haven't been able to choose what I eat. The choice has been made for me by a ration book from 1943. And even though this is voluntary, even though I can stop any time, the loss of choice feels oppressive. Now multiply that feeling by 5 years. 5 years of no choice. 5 years of being told what you can and cannot eat. 5 years of watching your children grow up never knowing what it's like to have seconds, to eat until you're full, to choose dessert just because you want it. That night, day 5, I eat the last of my bacon. I fry it slowly, trying to make the experience last. 2 thin slices. I eat them with some boiled potatoes and cabbage. The bacon is gone in less than a minute. I sit at my table, staring at my empty plate, and I feel this profound sadness. Not for me. I'm fine. I'm going back to normal in 2 days. But for everyone who lived this for real. For Nella Last and Elizabeth Calling and millions of others whose names I'll never know. They did this not for a week, but for years. And they did it not as an experiment, but as life. Day 6. I wake up lighter. Not physically lighter, though I've probably lost a few pounds. Lighter in mood. There's this strange clarity that comes from extended hunger. The fog in my brain is still there, but beneath it, something else has emerged, a kind of sharpness and awareness. I notice things I never noticed before. The texture of bread, the way margarine melts on my tongue, the first sip of tea in the morning, how it spreads warmth through my chest. These small pleasures, which used to be nothing, have become everything. This is what the diaries from 1943 revealed too. Once people adapted to rationing, once they moved past the initial shock, they began to appreciate things differently. A single orange became a treasure. A boiled sweet, which children received in tiny rations, became worthy of careful consideration. Do you eat it now or save it for tomorrow? I make breakfast. Toast, margarine, tea. I've developed a routine. I eat slowly now, deliberately. I used to eat breakfast while checking my phone, barely tasting anything. Now I put my phone away. I sit. I experience the meal, such as it is. Mid-morning, I realize something. I'm not as hungry as I was on day 3. My body has adjusted. This is what nutritionists call metabolic adaptation. When you consistently eat fewer calories, your metabolism slows down. You burn less energy. You move less. You think slower. Your body is trying to conserve everything. The people in wartime Britain experienced this collectively. Activity levels dropped. People walked slower, worked slower, moved with deliberate economy. It wasn't laziness, it was survival. Why rush when rushing burns calories you don't have? Lunch is more Woolton Pie. I've been rationing it carefully, and now I'm grateful for it. It's bland, sure, but it's food. It fills space, and I'm starting to understand why recipes like this became so important. They weren't just about nutrition, they were about continuity, about maintaining the ritual of meals even when the meals themselves had been reduced to almost nothing. Afternoon. I'm reading more about Lord Woolton, and I discover something remarkable. The rationing system, for all its hardships, actually improved the health of many British people. Infant mortality dropped during the war. Vitamin deficiency decreased. Life expectancy, incredibly, went up slightly. How is this possible? Because before the war, poor people ate terribly. They couldn't afford much meat or fresh vegetables. They lived on bread and margarine, tea and sugar. The wealthy ate well, but the working class struggled. Rationing changed that. Everyone got the same amount, and the government made sure that amount included essential nutrients: milk for children, orange juice, cod liver oil. These weren't luxuries anymore. They were distributed to everyone. So while the middle class ate less than before, the poor ate better than they ever had. Rationing created a weird kind of equality. Hunger for all, but also nutrition for all. This doesn't make the hunger noble, but it makes the system comprehensible. Woolton and his team weren't just managing scarcity, they were conducting the largest public health intervention in British history, and it worked. But here's what nobody talks about: the cost. Not the financial cost, though that was enormous. The psychological cost. The emotional cost of years of denial. I'm feeling it now on day 6. I'm not just hungry for food, I'm hungry for choice, for variety, for surprise. I want to not know what I'm having for dinner until the moment I decide. I want to feel spontaneous. I want to feel free. People in 1943 felt this too. They felt it intensely, and the frustration built up over years. By 1942, there are reports of women weeping in food queues, of shopkeepers being verbally abused, of neighbors turning on each other over perceived unfairness. The social fabric was straining. The government responded with propaganda, more posters, more radio broadcasts. Food is a weapon. We'll eat to beat the U-boat. They tried to maintain morale by making it all feel purposeful. You're not just enduring, you're fighting. Every meal is a blow against Hitler. Did people believe it? Some did. Many did, especially in the early years when the threat felt immediate and existential. But by 1944, with victory in sight, the enthusiasm was wearing thin. People were tired. They wanted butter, real butter, not margarine. They wanted eggs. They wanted to stop calculating and start living. And then the war ended. May 8th, 1945. Victory in Europe. Church bells ring. People dance in the streets. Surely rationing will end. They've won. They've sacrificed enough. Time to go back to normal. But it doesn't end. Rationing continues. In fact, it gets worse. Bread, which was never rationed during the war, gets rationed in 1946. Bread. Potatoes get rationed in 1947. People can't believe it. They endured rationing to win the war, and now, with the war over, they're being asked to endure more? The reason is simple but devastating. Britain is broke. The war cost everything. The country owes massive debts to America. The economy is shattered. And more than that, Britain now has to feed occupied Germany. The defeated Germans need food, and Britain has to provide it as part of the occupation. So rationing continues, and continues, and continues. It finally ends completely on July 4th, 1954. 9 years after the war ended. 14 years after it began. An entire generation of British children grew up never knowing what it was like to have unlimited butter, to choose your own food, to eat until you were actually full. Think about that. 14 years. I'm on day 6 of 7 and I'm already exhausted by it. 14 years is unimaginable. That evening, I make a simple dinner. The last of my bread, some cabbage, a small bit of margarine. I'm running low on everything now. Tomorrow is my last day, and I'll need to stretch what's left. I eat slowly. The bread is plain, the cabbage is overcooked, but I'm grateful for it. This is what the experiment has taught me: gratitude for small things, awareness of what I have. But it's also taught me something darker: how quickly comfort becomes need, how fast abundance becomes assumption. I've been on rations for 6 days, and I'm already struggling with it. The people in 1943 had it for 14 years, and many of them were simultaneously being bombed, losing family members, working in factories 12 hours a day. And they survived. That's the remarkable thing. They survived not through superhuman strength, but through collective determination, through making jokes about powdered egg, through sharing recipes for vegetable pies, through calling the Minister of Food Uncle Fred and actually meaning it affectionately. They found ways to make horror ordinary, and in making it ordinary, they made it survivable. Day 7, the last day. I wake up and the first thing I think is, tomorrow I can eat whatever I want. This thought fills me with more joy than it probably should. I lie in bed, mentally planning my first post-ration meal. Eggs, multiple eggs, bacon, real bacon, thick and salty, toast with butter, actual butter, not margarine, coffee, as much as I want. But I'm not there yet. I have one more day to get through. I make my final wartime breakfast: toast, the last scraping of margarine, tea without sugar. I eat it slowly, trying to honor the experience. 7 days ago, this would have seemed like deprivation. Now it feels normal. That's how fast humans adapt. A week of scarcity, and my baseline has shifted. The morning passes. I'm not particularly hungry. My body has adjusted to this new reality. If I continued, I'd keep adapting. My metabolism would slow further. I'd learn to function on less. This is what the human body does. It survives. But surviving isn't thriving, and that's the distinction I keep coming back to. The British rationing system kept people alive. It prevented mass starvation. It distributed resources fairly, or as fairly as possible during a total war. By those metrics, it was successful. But it also created a generation who grew up with a complicated relationship to food. My grandmother, who lived through rationing as a child, hoarded food her entire life. Her pantry was always overstocked. She couldn't throw anything away. Even in her 80s, living in abundance, she couldn't shake the fear of scarcity. The rationing ended, but its psychological effects lasted lifetimes. Lunch on day 7 is simple. The last bit of Woolton Pie, now slightly stale but still edible, some boiled potato, water. I'm out of tea. I'm out of most things. This is what happens when you ration. Eventually, you run out. You're always running out. The whole system is designed around controlled scarcity, and you're constantly approaching zero. Afternoon. I take a final walk, thinking about what I've learned. The physical hunger was significant, yes, but the mental and emotional aspects were more profound. The constant calculation, the loss of choice, the way every decision about food became weighted with importance. And I only did this for a week. I can't imagine 14 years. But millions of people lived it. They're mostly gone now, that generation. The last survivors are in their 90s. Soon there will be no one left to remember what it was like to queue for butter, to make a single egg last, to dream about bread. Their sacrifice is fading from memory. We teach about World War II in schools, but we focus on the battles, the politics, the dramatic moments. We don't spend much time on the kitchen front. on the quiet endurance of ordinary people doing something extraordinarily difficult every single day for years on end. That's what this week has taught me. The heroism of the mundane. The courage required not for one dramatic act, but for thousands of small acts of daily persistence. Getting up hungry, going to bed hungry, doing it again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. Nella Last, the housewife from Barrow-in-Furness, whose diary I've been reading, writes this entry in December 1943. I stood looking at the week's rations today, and I thought, this is such a small pile. It looks like nothing. But we'll make it work. We always do. That sentence captures everything. We'll make it work. We always do. That evening, my 7th and final evening on rations, I make the simplest dinner imaginable. Boiled potatoes, cabbage, a tiny bit of margarine melted over the top. No protein left, no treats, no variety, just this. I eat it, all of it, and I feel something unexpected. Not satisfaction, but completion. I did it. 7 days on the exact rations that sustained an entire nation through its darkest hour. I experienced a tiny fraction of what they endured, and even that fraction was difficult. But here's what matters. Tomorrow morning, I get to stop. They didn't. The next morning comes and I break my fast with abundance. I make scrambled eggs, 3 eggs, I use real butter in the pan, I fry bacon until my kitchen smells like childhood Saturdays. I make toast with thick slabs of butter, I brew coffee rich and dark, and I add cream, real cream. I sit down with this meal, this embarrassment of riches, and for the first time in 8 days, I eat until I'm actually full. And I cry. Not dramatic sobbing, but just tears sliding down my face while I eat, because it's overwhelming. The taste, yes. The fullness, definitely. But more than that, the freedom, the ability to choose, the knowledge that when this meal is done, I can have another one just like it, or different, whatever I want. The choice is mine. This is what rationing stole. Not just calories, not just butter and sugar and meat, but agency, the fundamental human ability to decide for yourself what you'll eat today. For 1 week, I gave that up voluntarily. For 14 years, millions gave it up because they had no choice. Let me tell you what happened after rationing ended in 1954. Britain went food crazy. Not immediately. Not in some dramatic orgy of consumption, but steadily, over years. Supermarkets began opening, modeled on American stores, offering unprecedented choice. Instead of queuing at separate shops for meat, bread, and vegetables, you could get everything in one place. And the variety exploded. 40 types of breakfast cereal, 20 kinds of cheese, endless options. The generation that grew up on rations became the generation that built modern consumer culture. And you can see rationing's influence everywhere. They wanted variety. They wanted abundance. They wanted their children to never know what it felt like to be limited. British cuisine changed too. Before the war, British cooking was actually quite sophisticated, at least in upper-class homes. But rationing destroyed that. When you can only use 4 ounces of butter per week, you can't make proper pastries. When eggs are rare, you can't practice making soufflés. An entire generation lost the culinary knowledge that had been passed down for centuries. This is why British food developed such a terrible reputation in the mid-20th century. It wasn't that British people couldn't cook. It's that they'd spent 14 years learning to cook without ingredients. They'd mastered making something from nothing, But once the ingredients returned, the skills were gone. Some food historians argue that British cuisine is only now, in the 21st century, recovering from rationing, that it took 3 generations to rebuild what 14 years destroyed. But there were positive legacies too. The National Health Service, which launched in 1948, was partly inspired by the success of wartime nutrition programs. If the government could ensure every child got milk and orange juice during the war, why not continue that in peacetime? The welfare state itself emerged from this logic. Collective sacrifice had worked. Collective support could work too. The community networks that formed around rationing persisted. Women who'd shared recipes and tips in queues remained friends for life. Neighborhoods that had come together to manage scarcity maintained those bonds. The war changed social relations, made them more equal, more communal. And there's this. The people who lived through rationing developed a profound appreciation for food. Not in a foodie way, not gourmet appreciation, but something deeper. They understood that eating wasn't a right, it was a gift. Every meal was a small miracle of logistics, agriculture, sacrifice, and luck. My grandmother, who I mentioned earlier, used to make me finish everything on my plate, not as punishment, but as principle. There are people starving, she'd say. And she meant it, because she'd known hunger. Not starvation, but that chronic insufficiency, that never quite enough feeling. And she never wanted me to take abundance for granted. I thought I understood what she meant. I didn't. Not really. Not until this week. Because here's what I've learned. Hunger isn't just a physical sensation. It's a lens. It changes how you see everything. Food becomes precious. Waste becomes obscene. Gratitude becomes automatic. For 7 days, I saw the world through that lens. And even though I'm back to abundance now, even though my refrigerator is full and I can eat whatever I want whenever I want it, something has shifted. I can't unknow what I now know. Every time I throw away food, I think about it. Every time I complain about a meal, I catch myself. Every time I mindlessly eat while staring at my phone, I remember sitting at my table on day 5, eating 2 thin slices of bacon with complete attention, because that's all there was. The British people who lived through rationing couldn't unknow it either. It marked them. It shaped them. For better and worse, it made them who they were. Let me tell you about the ration books themselves, the physical objects. After rationing ended in 1954, people kept them. Thousands of people put their ration books in drawers, in attics, in boxes, and held on to them. Not for any practical reason. They were worthless paper now, but they kept them anyway. These small, buff-colored books, with their pages of coupons all marked and torn, became artifacts of survival, proof that they'd endured. You can find them now in museums, in archives, sometimes on eBay. I've held one. It's just paper, thin and yellowed, but it feels heavier than it should, because it represents something enormous. 14 years of someone's life. Every meal they ate, every shortage they navigated, every small victory and every frustration. The woman who owned the ration book I held was named Margaret Thompson. I don't know anything else about her, but I know she ate 4 ounces of bacon per week. I know she saved her coupons carefully. I know she made it through. Her ration book is proof. And now there are millions of these books scattered across Britain, in museums, in private collections, each one a small monument to ordinary courage. This is what I think about now when I think about World War II. Not just the battles and the famous speeches and the dramatic moments, But Margaret Thompson with her ration book, Nella Last writing in her diary about making birthday cake, Elizabeth Colling dreaming about bread and butter, the millions whose names we'll never know, standing in queues, stretching 4 ounces of cheese across a week, making do. They weren't heroes in the traditional sense. They didn't storm beaches or fly fighter planes, but they did something equally important. They survived. They maintained ordinary life under extraordinary pressure. They raised children, went to work, cooked meals, kept going. And they did it for 14 years. My 1 week feels absurd in comparison, a drop of water pretending to understand the ocean. But even a drop can teach you something. It can show you the properties of water, the way it flows, the way it feels. And this week showed me something about hunger, about sacrifice, about the distance between comfort and survival. That distance is smaller than I thought. 7 days took me from abundance to genuine difficulty. 14 years took a generation from one world to another. I'm standing in my kitchen now, the same kitchen where this experiment began 7 days ago. The counter that held my week's rations is empty. The ration book replica I used sits next to the sink. In a few minutes, I'll put it away, file it somewhere, probably forget about it. But I won't forget what it taught me. There's a photograph I keep thinking about. It was taken in London on VE Day, May 8, 1945. A group of women are dancing in the street. They're laughing, arms linked, dresses swirling. And if you look closely, you can see how thin they are. Not emaciated, but lean. Years of rationing show in their faces, their arms, their posture. But they're dancing anyway, because it's over. The war is over. They survived. That photograph reminds me that survival isn't about being comfortable. It's about continuing, about getting up every morning and making something from whatever you have, about finding joy in small things, about dancing even when you're hungry. The people of wartime Britain did that. They danced while hungry. They sang while tired. They made jokes about powdered egg and created recipes for pies made of turnips. They transformed deprivation into a kind of defiant grace. That's their legacy. Not just that they won the war, though they did, but that they maintained their humanity while doing it. They shared, they endured, they kept going. And when I think about the challenges we face now, when I feel overwhelmed by the state of the world, I think about them, about Nella Last and Elizabeth Colling and Margaret Thompson and the millions of others who faced something truly difficult and didn't break. If they could stretch 4 ounces of butter across a week for 14 years, surely we can face our own challenges. If they could find joy in a single egg, surely we can find gratitude in our abundance. If they could maintain hope while bombs fell and ships sank and the future was uncertain, surely we can maintain hope now. This week taught me about hunger, but more than that, it taught me about resilience, about the quiet, persistent courage that doesn't make headlines but changes history, about the strength required to endure not for a day but for years. The ration diet wasn't just about food. It was about what humans can survive, what they can adapt to, what they can overcome. And the answer, I've learned, is almost anything, if they have to, if they're together, if they keep going. The week's over now. The experiment is done. Tomorrow I'll eat normally again, and by next week, this will feel like a distant memory. The hunger will fade, the exhaustion will pass, but something will remain. A small change in how I see the world, a new appreciation for what I have, a deeper understanding of what others endured. That's worth 1 week of hunger. That's worth the discomfort and the exhaustion and the cold. Because now I know something I didn't know before. I know what a real sacrifice looks like. And I know that ordinary people are capable of extraordinary endurance. The British people who lived through rationing taught me that. Margaret Thompson's ration book taught me that. 7 days of 4-ounce butter rations taught me that. And I'll never forget it.